I want to share an idea that I had that I think could change the world. So bear with me. um, the idea starts with this concept of SIM-Biogenesis, which some people know it, some people don't. It's a relatively new scientific concept. It's been around for about 40 years. But the basic idea is that evolution, living systems don't evolve in a linear fashion from one thing to another. They evolve in a exponential fashion. And so a really good example of this that we think we know about is for 1.7 billion years on Earth, there were only bacteria. And those bacteria developed about 4 main strategies for getting energy, food. As these different types of bacteria evolved, there was a certain point where they started living in colonies together because their individual evolved specializations were mutually beneficial. So the photosynthetic bacteria could produce complex molecules, the anaerobic and aerobic bacteria could break them down, and the swimming bacteria could help move the whole thing around. And eventually what happened, they think, scientists think, is that community of symbiotic different bacteria became so integrated that they actually became the first nucleated cells, eukaryotes. And then those cells became so deeply interwoven that they began to reproduce and behave like individual meta-organisms, even though they're made up of smaller organisms. So this idea of individualization, specialization, and then reintegration in symbiosis and ultimately symbiogenesis is a pattern that we're seeing in nature. And I think that this is where we are going, or where we can go if we choose to, as a species. This concept of symbiosis is how all natural ecosystems work. There is no such thing as waste in nature. The saying in permaculture is waste is only waste if it's wasted. We have a linear style of consumption, but pretty much every mature ecosystem is more like it's not really a circle, it's a web of interactions where bacteria will break down decaying matter, which will then provide nutrients that plants will grow back up into complex molecules that bacteria and fungi and animals and humans will break down. And then it's actually the exact same iterative symbiotic cycle that the bacteria that became the basis for all animal, plant, and fungi cells use. It's those main strategies of building up energy from the light of the sun and breaking them down in this constant cycle. And so we can actually build human habitations, human settlements, communities, houses, communities, cities that function on the same principle. And this is already happening. There's the Living Building Challenge, there's Earthships, and there's all of these permaculture technologies that address certain parts of the issues. For example, some people have developed composting toilets that break down human waste into sterile compost, or biodigesters that you can feed food scraps, and methanogenic bacteria break the food scraps down into natural gas that you can use as a direct replacement for anything that runs on natural gas. All sorts of strategies that people all over the world have been developing. But the one missing piece is the coordination, the ability for us to all talk to each other to see how these solutions that are generally individual integrate. Because just having a composting toilet isn't really enough. Because if it's not part of an integrated system that has no concept of waste and everything is recycled and there is a process to deal with everything that is produced, then it's not really solving the problem. It's just lessening impact of the current paradigm, which is extremely destructive because it's linear. So the project that we're working on is called, I like to call it SIM, S-I-M, like the Sims, SIM-Biogenesis. I like puns. And the idea is any of these systems, everything from a human to a generator to a biogas plant to an aquaponic system, can be broken down into inputs and outputs. Stuff goes in, stuff goes out. If we can document all of those inputs and outputs, we can actually take every known technique, every process that takes something and turns it into something else, and turn them into building blocks. Little blocks. If you ever played The Incredible Machine as a kid, you know what I'm talking about. We could have this virtual interface where you have a toolbox of every known technique, and you drag one into a work area, and then you see the inputs and outputs coming off of it, and then you can link those to another block that takes the outputs from one as the inputs, and you can create this web of relationships, the goal of which being a system that is driven entirely by renewable sources of energy. The sun, the decomposition of matter, and gravity and falling water are the primary ones, but geothermal is also another one, wind, which is ultimately solar power, those sorts of things. And so if we had this toolbox, it's like if you have an alphabet made up of 27 letters, you can make this in every word that I've spoken in this entire video. If we can break every known technique down into these base units, we can use them to design massively complex ecosystems that not only meet human needs, but do so while working in partnership with living systems. So human civilization does not necessarily need to be destructive or in competition with the rest of the biosphere. It's like cancer. It's like if we keep living the way that we are, we will ultimately destroy the body that we are a part of that provides us with life. This is not something that is unnatural. It's humans are not meant to be at odds with the earth. This is a typical thing that happens in ecological succession. Human society is no different. All we're doing is leveling back up to the ecosystem level. You know, first we had the bacteria, then we had the cell, then we had multicellular organisms, then we had humans, then we have the ecosystem, and then we have the world. And they're all iteratively larger, complex systems. They're all living and all ultimately powered by the light of the sun, which to me is the coolest freaking thing I can think of. But anyway, I'm not convinced that the world is just going to end. I think the idea that we're just going to sit by and watch as everything collapses and we run out of oil and everyone kills each other, I think is an insult to the human spirit. I think that the human mind, the human ability for love and compassion and learning and challenge was made for times like this. You know, we just heard that the Arctic shelf is collapsing and we're facing sea level rises of 5 to 10 feet. You know, there are points of no return, but every good story starts at the point of no return. The point of return isn't the end, it's the beginning. This is the point where we get to step up. The times that we're living in call on us to be better than we have been, to reconcile the hurt that we've done, not just to communities of people, but to communities of animals, of plants, fungus, bacteria that we have isolated in our pursuit of individual happiness. And I think that the overwhelming, you know, direction of the conversations that people are having right now, given, you know, permaculture and open source design and decentralization and the sharing economy, like we're all moving towards this because that's where the future is. We have to use less resources. The only way that we can use less resources is if we collaborate. And if we collaborate, we can actually create systems that are entirely photosynthetic, that can meet human needs on the scale that we're talking about. I believe that it is possible to provide for all 9 billion or soon to be 9 billion people on this planet through innovative design. I don't think that anyone has to go. I don't think that it's unnatural for us to be here and to be thriving together. And I think that that belief is fundamental to taking action. Because if we don't believe that the future can be better, if we don't believe that it's worth it, then why would we try? We have the ability of foresight. Why would we go down a street that we know is blocked? But if we see that there's a possibility, if we see that there's another way that actually looks promising, that gives us the strength to act. And I think that's what we need right now. We need a new story. We need a reason to believe that if we work together and if we work fast, we can actually resolve this. And I believe that we can. what I need and what I don't know how to do is I need help programming. I need help possibly with JavaScript, I think, but basically I want a form that looks like the one that I will probably be showing you over this. And the idea is that the answers from the form populate a database, and then the database is queried and put into a user graphical interface that makes things that look kind of like this, where you have like a biodigester, and then it shows what goes in, what goes out, at what temperature. So basically it's what is it, how much, how often. And then basically you would just have a play button. And so you would put things into the environment, and you would hit play, and it would virtually play out what we can expect coming in and out of these things. And we can see where things are piling up and where waste is being produced that isn't being processed, and we can figure out what other things we can pull from the toolbox to solve that until we create regenerative ecosystems that can provide for human needs while also resolving the ecological crisis by working in partnership with known living systems and techniques. So this is my strategy for saving the world. I consider this to be my life's work, but I also don't have the skills to make this happen. My understanding is that from a programming perspective, it would not be that hard. So if my appeal to you is that if you think that anything I just said is interesting, of course, feel free to run with it. These ideas don't belong to me. It's how nature works. But I would like to collaborate with you. If you are a programmer or know a programmer, please share this video. And let's make this happen, because I don't see any other way that we are going to get through this unless we get through it together.